Hey ninjas, welcome back. Today, we are going to learn about scope, hoisting, and closures. Scope determines the visibility of variables. In simple terms, when we declare a variable inside a function, a loop, a block, or outside everything, each one behaves differently based on where it can be used or accessed. And in JavaScript, variables have three main types of scope: global scope, function scope, and block scope. Let me explain each of them step by step. Variables declared outside of any function or block exist in the global scope. As you can see here, we have three variables. Language, declared outside the function and the while loop. X, declared inside the function greet. Y, declared inside the if statement. Here, only the variable language is a global variable, because it is declared outside any function or block. And global variable can be accessed from anywhere in your code. As you can see here, the variable language is declared globally. That means we can easily access it from anywhere in the code, inside the function, and even inside the if statement. So no matter where we use it, the program can still read the same global variable. Also, variables declared with var, let, or const behave the same way when declared globally. They all become global variables. Okay, that was all about global scope. Now let's talk about function scope. Variables declared inside a function are part of function scope. These variables only exist inside that function, and we cannot access them from anywhere else in the code. Let me show you an example. Here, when we print this declared value inside the function, it works perfectly. But when we try to log it outside the function, we get an error. The reason this happens is because variables created inside a function are stored in that function's local memory, and they only exist while the function is running. After the function finishes, the variable is removed. That's why it can't be accessed from outside. Okay, so that was function scope. Now let's talk about block scope. So, after ES6 was introduced, we got let and const, and with that, block scope was added to JavaScript. Basically, whenever we write code inside curly braces, like in an if, for, or while, that becomes its own little area. Variables declared with let and const stay inside that block. While var is not block scoped, it ignores curly braces and only respects function scope. Now let me explain this example step by step so that you can clearly understand how these variable behaves and works inside block scope. Here, we have an if block, and inside it we declared three variables, one with let, one with const, and one with var. Inside the block, all three variables work perfectly fine because they're declared there. But once we come outside the block, notice what happens. Here, block let and block const give an error, because they only exist inside that block. On the other hand, block var still works outside. That's because var does not follow block scope, it only cares about function scope, so it sort of escapes the block. Alright ninjas, this was all about scope. Now let's move on to our next topic, hoisting. In simple words, hoisting means JavaScript automatically moves all variable and function declarations to the top of their scope before running the code. Let me show you a simple example, and you'll see exactly how it works. As you can see here, I first assign a value to x and then print it. After that, I declare the variable with var. Now, as you know, we normally declare a variable before using it. And you might guess that this code will give an error or some unexpected result. But when we run it, it prints 5 correctly. This happens because, behind the scenes, JavaScript actually scans all the declarations and moves them to the top of their scope before running the code. Behind the scenes, it looks like this. One very important thing to remember is that only variable declarations are hoisted, not the value assignments. Let me show you an example. Here, JavaScript already knows that x exists because it saw the declaration first when scanning the code behind the scenes. The declared variable is moved to the top of the code, like this. But the value 5 hasn't been given to x yet when print x runs. So it shows undefined. Now, this behavior, where the variable goes to the top and gets undefined, only happens with var. If you try the same thing using let or const, you'll actually get an error, not undefined. As you can see here on the screen, when we run this code, it throws an error saying something like cannot access a before initialization. Now, here's what's really happening behind the scenes. JavaScript actually hoists all declarations, whether they're made with var, let, or const. So yes, even let and const are technically hoisted. But the big difference is how they are handled once they're hoisted. For var, JavaScript not only moves the declaration to the top, but it also initializes it with a default value of undefined. But for let and const, JavaScript moves the declaration up too, but it doesn't assign any value to them yet. So they remain in a special state called the temporal dead zone. They only start working when the code actually reaches the line where they are declared and assigned a value. Now, in the case of functions, they are also hoisted, just like variables, but there's one big difference. Let me go through this example first before explaining the actual reason. As you can see here, just like variables, we're calling the function before it's even declared. You might guess that it would result in an error or undefined, but surprisingly, it gives the actual result. But why does this happen? Behind the scenes, functions are also hoisted, just like variables. When JavaScript scans the code and finds a function declaration, instead of moving just the name like it does with variables, it actually moves the entire function body to the top of its scope. So when we call the function before its declaration, the actual function executes and prints the result, instead of giving an error or undefined. So ninjas, that was all about hoisting. And finally, let's move on to our next very important topic, closures. A closure is basically a function that remembers the variables from the place where it was created, even after that place has finished executing. Let me show you one simple example. This will make everything crystal clear. Here in this example, as you can see, we've simply created two functions. In the outer function, we declared one variable called count and set its value to 0. Inside it, there's another function named inner that uses that count variable from its parent function. Now here's the interesting part. When we call outer once, it runs and gives us back the inner function. So now, when we call counter for the first time, it prints 1. But when we call it the second time, you might think it will again print 1, right? Because normally, when a function finishes running, all its data and variables are removed from memory. So it's natural to guess that it would start fresh again. But here's the surprise. Instead of printing 1 again, it prints 2. And when we call it again, it prints 3. So what's happening here? This is because of something called a closure. Even though the outer function has already finished, the inner function still remembers the previous value of count. It keeps that value stored, so whenever we call it the next time, it continues counting from where it left off and updates it again. And that's exactly what a closure does. It allows a function to remember and continue using variables from the place where it was created, even after that place is gone. Alright ninjas, this was all about scope, hoisting, and closure. Now head to JavaScript Ninjas and practice this 5 simple question until you feel comfortable with it. See you in the next lesson.